a few great questions coming through. This is the time of week where you get on Facebook Live and do a broadcast to answer your questions. So one of the questions we had was can you show us an inspection of the flow frames? So that's what we're going to do today. If you've got other ideas of what you'd like us to see, we're here to help you get started in beekeeping and with your flow hives. So put them in the comments below if you'd like to see something in particular. Today we're going to do an inspection of the flow frames in this hive, and we might actually take a look at some other hives as well, just to get a gauge of what they look like at the various stages. I'm just opening up this hive here. I've already given them 3 good puffs of smoke in the entrance. It's good to wait a couple of minutes after you do that, and that helps calm the bees down. So these frames have been in here for quite a while, and they've been cycled and harvested many times, and you can see the different colours here. That's a fresh one coming in with the wild quince honey. This is the earlier stuff that has more of the heathland flavours in it here, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to isolate the flavours like that to share and enjoy. So to inspect the hive, first of all you give the hive some smoke, wait a couple of minutes, put your bee suit on. Do remember safety with bees. Some people have severe allergic reactions, so I'm just putting on my bee suit now. The jacket, this is one of our jackets. This is one of my favourites. I much prefer a jacket than pants these days because it's just simple to pull on and off. So then the whole suit rather. So then the lid comes off. If you've secured it with the wing screws, then undo those on the side. Take your lid off. Then you've got the inner cover. Now, to prise the inner cover off, you'll need your hive tool that comes with our suit jacket or full suit. And what you want to do is just prise under the edge here. If you are new to beekeeping, wear your gloves as well until you really get to know beekeeping and your hive. So I'm just lifting that off now. You can see the bees have started to get a bit carried away and starting to put comb on the inside of the inner cover. That's pretty normal. We try to space it so you get less of that, but they still do sometimes. You can see a hive beetle running around here. Squash any of those you see. Sorry about that beetle. You didn't mean to be in the wrong place, but it's best to have less of those in your hive. So I'm just going to put the inner cover down by the entrance here so any bees can crawl back into the hive. So here we are. This is the flow frames. Now you can see these have been in here for a while. We haven't taken them out for a bit, and they've started to put a bit of burr comb in between. Some bees will do more of that and some bees won't. Depends a bit on the genetics of your hive. So to get a frame out, first of all, you can just break the burr comb with your hive tool. Try to make it nice and clean so you don't end up with burr comb scratching the flow frame surface on the way out. So I'm just being careful, trying not to damage any bees as I do this. We've got a couple of interested ones, and I'm just cutting that burr comb away. Same here. And where you get a bunch of bees that are in your way of working, you can just give them a little bit of smoke like that, and they'll generally run away, except for not now because it looks like they can't quite get through. There we go. Okay, they're heading off now, and that gives you access to that area. So I'm just sliding the hive tool down and cutting the comb that they've joined them together with. Okay, the next thing to do is, I'll just cut that bit away too. There we go. It was on the other frame, hang on. A little bit there. Okay. Next thing to do is they come out just about like regular frames at this end with the J tool coming under the end like that. But before you do that, I'm just going to loosen up the other end. Now, if they've been in there for a while like these frames have, the bees would have really stuck them down to the excluder. So there's 2 lift points at this end. One is under here, and we've just made enough room to get your hive tool under there, and then you can just lift it a little bit like that, There's another lift point here, right under the bottom of the frame. Your hive tool fits perfectly like that to give it a little lift there. Then the other end comes out like a regular frame, and grab onto that with your hand, get your hive tool under the other end, and then slowly and gently just pull that frame of honey out. So the reason why I say slowly is that first frame you get out, there's a lot of bees and you don't want to roll them. We could add a little bit of smoke to that area to lessen the amount of bees in between them, because if there is a lot of bees, sometimes you can squash them just by rolling on each other. So I've just added a little bit of smoke now to either side, and the bees are scattering. You can see them climbing off the edge of the frame onto my hand. Try not to put your finger on a bee or it will sting you. Wear your gloves if you're new to beekeeping. So let's have a look at what's going on here. So this frame, it looks to me like they filled it. They ate some away in the early spring, which is pretty normal. And then as the flowers have come on, they've filled that area back in again. So this frame is probably about 60% capped, and it's almost there. If you harvested that, you'd probably find the moisture content would still be acceptable. Similar on the other side. Look at that beautiful capping. They're just closing in here. They're so that's when they've capped it. So that's they've decided that the moisture content is low enough in those cells to wax it over and keep it for later. And luckily they store so much so we can share some of their honey too. And here's where they're still doing the final dewatering of the honey. And it's really a pretty thing as they close the caps in. That's beautiful. Okay, what I'm going to do is put that frame aside now. Now we have harvested a few of these frames recently, so hopefully we'll get to see a variation. I'm just putting that down beside the hive on the ground, and I've actually put it on the end because there was a lot of bees on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the next frame out. The next frame will be a bit easier to pull out because you can now go sideways and not have to worry so much about rolling bees as you pull the frames out. And going sideways helps crack the honey. So I should be able to pretty easily lift that now, and it's well clear of all of the other frames. So this one's completely capped on both sides, and that's what a flow frame looks like when it's completely capped. This side the same. Beautiful capping, beautiful honey. Well done, girls. So that's a perfect example of a flow frame ready to harvest. And the end is showing you a similar thing here with all of those cells full of honey. And they've even got a little bit carried away and started to put wax on this viewing window. If you wanted to, you could clean that off just by running your tool down so that you get a little bit better view. Try not to dig into the capping though. So let's see if we can get to a frame that we've harvested. We harvested about a week ago on this hive, and I believe looks like they've filled it all back in again.
Cedar, Jenny's asking, she says she hasn't been able to get any honey from her frames this spring. Is that normal? As this time last year she had an abundance of honey.
Okay, so she had an abundance. You had an abundance of honey last season, but this time not so much honey. So there's a few factors involved. The two factors are a lot of bees and a good nectar flow. So one of those things must be must be out to not get a good harvest. If you open the side windows of the hive and there's a lot of bees in there, then it's probably the nectar flow isn't very strong. If there's not a lot of bees, it could be your hive's not very strong, in which case you may need to take a look at your brood nest and see if the queen's laying well, and if not, introduce a new one. Or you can just wait and the bees will supersede her if they find she's not laying enough eggs. But yeah, take a look around at what other hives are doing, and if other hives are really bringing in a lot of honey in your area and yours isn't, then your colony may need a bit of new genetics in order to get that happening. Okay, just please put any more questions in the comments below. Here to answer your questions. Also let us know what you'd like to see next week. I'm just going to pull out another frame here, just by going sideways again.
Barry's curious as to why you didn't pull the end frame first, as it may have been easier to remove.
With the flow frames, it doesn't make that much of a difference which one you move first. Certainly in the brood box, that is often the case, because you've got a little bit of space on the edge to move. As the flow frames we've made nice and tight across here in order to create that end window. We've tried to calculate it so you've got exactly the right amount of space on the edge, so there actually isn't any wiggle room to move the hive over. So any frame you choose has to come up straight and vertical, so it doesn't really matter which one you start with. Okay, just pulling out this next one. It's coming up, and what we have here is another full frame of honey. So this hive really is due for harvesting. Of course, you don't need to harvest them, you can leave it all there for the bees, but while they're making a lot of honey, it's an opportune moment to fill up your jars, and hopefully they'll refill the frames again quite quickly. It's amazing, when there's a really good flow on, you can harvest all these frames and a few weeks later they'll be full again. So if you don't harvest, then that's okay, but you do miss out on honey that would have otherwise been refilled again. Look at that, they're all wandering around. Of course, we're above the excluder here, so what you're looking at is all of the worker bees. There is no drones and no queen up above the excluder in this hive. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below. We'll keep answering them. What we might do is put these frames back and go and have a look at another hive that actually doesn't have any honey in it, just so you can see what it looks like. Because all of these frames, I thought we might find some that were half full, but they've been so quick to refill that they're all full again.
Judy says your bees are so calm. I'd like to know what you use in your smoker, or are they just calm?
What I use in my smoker is whatever is around. So I just scraped up some leaves and some garden mulch, and it happened to be camphor laurel leaves, which is a tree that's a bit of a weed around here, but it has got a strong smell. But it's nothing to do with what's in the smoker. It's more to do with the genetics of the hive. So we do have puppy hives and we do have calm hives. So if you've got a cranky hive, then it could be a good idea to introduce a new queen with genetics that are nice and calm. Of course, there's different schools of thought on that. Some people like to keep more aggressive hives and believe there's benefits to that. And it really just depends. If I've got a really nicely producing hive that's a bit cranky, I'll often keep it for as long as I can bear the crankiness, because they're doing a great load of production, and if they're producing well and your hive's really healthy, then you don't have to inspect your flow frames prior to harvest, so you can just keep harvesting. Now we don't have the varroa mites here in this country, so we don't have to inspect so often as other places. Now these some people like to inspect their flow frames often prior to harvest. That's not what my dad and I designed them for. We designed them so you didn't have to disturb the hive in order to harvest. But if you're new to beekeeping and new to flow frames, you might want to have a look and just gauge what the pattern looks like here and how that translates to what's going on inside the hive. So look at the side windows, the end window, then have a look at the in the flow frames, just to learn about yes, when it looks like that, then it's mostly capped in here, then it's good for harvest. So as you go, you'll find you will need to take a look less and less, and that flow frames will be used for what they're intended, which is to harvest without opening the hive. Any more questions?
Yeah, Lindsay is asking, why are there so many bees on a fully capped frame?
So there's so many bees because there's lots of bees in this hive and they need somewhere to be. So when the frames are fully capped, you'll find they will be, and there's a lot of bees in the hive, they will be covered in bees still, even though there's nothing really to do. They'll just be hanging out there, waiting for another job. And sometimes they will be ducking in and out, foraging for pollen and so on. But if they've run out of space to store honey, then they can't store any more honey, and that is one of the triggers that triggers them to divide their hive and swarm. So if they don't have space to raise their brood or put any honey, then they might decide to raise a new queen and split the colony. So what I'm going to do is put this frame I pulled out back into the hive now. If you've got any more questions, put them in the comments below. I've got a few bees just hanging on this frame. I'm just going to give it a little shake, just so that I don't squash them as I'm putting this back into the hive. Now, oops, I've collected a bit of pine bark. There we go.
Kate's asking, how often do you need to inspect?
So here in Australia, commercial beekeepers often inspect the brood nests twice a year just to make sure that it's happy and healthy. In other continents, there's things like varroa mite, which require much more inspecting depending on the genetics of your hive and also on your strategy to manage varroa mites. But often people are inspecting a lot through the spring and summer season for those mites and doing treatments and so on. So the best information for that is from your local beekeepers. So find out how often you need to inspect hives in your area. Now when you put the frames back into your hive, just make sure that this window lines up neatly, so it makes a nice flat pattern here and creates that observation window so you can look in and see how your honey is going. Okay, let's wander up and have a look at another hive, just so I can show you what it looks like when there isn't much honey in the flow frames. If you've got more questions, put them in the comments below. So I noticed this morning that this hive up the end here isn't actually doing so well. So it swarmed about 6 weeks ago, and we actually got to capture that swarm, which is great, but this needs a little bit of love, because if you have a look in this window at the back here, there actually isn't much action. You can't see a whole lot of bees, so we want to get in there and make sure there's plenty of brood showing that their queen's now laying and the hive will bounce back. If you look in the side window, there's a little bit light on bees, there's some, but not really enough to get a lot of honey storage. So it could be that the genetics of the new queen isn't strong enough, or that it's just going to take a little longer for them to build up to capacity again after the swarm. So I'm going to open up the lid here. Now the observation windows, when we've given frames to commercial beekeepers, they tend to disregard their end frame view, thinking that they're used to just lifting the hive and going, well, it's heavy enough, time to harvest. But after a while they realise that this is actually really useful. There's so much you can gauge from this end frame view. You can actually watch the colours of the honey come in. You can watch whether there's enough bees. You can really learn a lot about what's going on in your hive just by looking in the windows. So we've had some good feedback from Canadian commercial beekeepers on that, and that they really enjoy the windows now. I'm just opening up the flow frames here to have a look what's going on. And so you can see here there's a little bit of honey storage going on, which is good. So we are getting some new nectar coming in and some light capping, but otherwise it's looking a bit light on. So certainly won't be harvesting this frame anytime soon, which was also clear by the end frame view, which was showing no honey at all. So it really did give you a good idea of what's going on in the frame, which is a whole lot of not much. If you have a look at this side, there's almost no nectar at all. It's a pretty dry frame here. But you can see the way they've connected the wax between the cells. I'll just pull out one more frame, which is even earlier in its. Oh no, this one has actually got some honey. So it's possible that frame that I just pulled out we harvested, and they've eaten the honey out. But here is the side window view. So this was visible through the side window, which is another useful feature of the flow hive. And you can see there's no honey at all, but you can see the way they've used their wax to join the parts of the flow frame together and create their hexagon cells. So I don't know if you can see that, but if you look nice and close on the angle there, you can see the wax they're using is a slightly browner colour. And you can see the way they've joined all the parts. And that's the first thing they do before they start putting nectar in the cells and starting to dewater it to create the honey.
Chuck's asking if you've ever seen different types of honey in a single flow frame.
Absolutely. So bees, when they've run out of one flower, they will move on to another. So it really just depends on what's going on with the flowers around you. So if you've got a lot of short flowerings of different things, then you will get times where there's different coloured honeys in one frame. And sometimes you'll see it coming out with the two-tone honey flowing out of the tube, which is fun to see. But generally you get on a nice flow, so they might fill a couple of frames, so you get frames of one flavour here and then fill a couple more frames, and as they work from the inside of the hive out to the extremities, you'll find you'll get different flavours across the box. But that does depend. If you're on a monofloral source, you'll get all of one thing across your whole honey super. So it really does depend, but it is nice to have the option of isolating those flavours more so. Thanks a lot for watching. Have we got more questions?
We do have more questions.
Okay, keep the questions coming.
Kate wants to know if we do anything special to the jars before we put honey in them. Do we sterilise them?
Okay, before putting honey in the jars, it's not necessary to sterilise them. I would recommend recycling jars from your kitchen drawers, but do make sure they're clean. Honey is antibacterial, it has amazing properties, and for me anyway, it doesn't need any sterilisation. Certainly what's in the jar shouldn't make your honey go off. What will make your honey go off is if you've harvested too early. Let's say you harvested a frame like this, and the honey isn't ready, it's just nectar. Then you'll have a moisture content well above 20%, in which case fermentation will occur in a month or two after it's been put in the jar, unless it's in the fridge or you've eaten it. So harvesting it early will create off honey, not so much sterilisation of the jars. But good question. If you're preserving jam, you do need to sterilise your jars, but not with honey.
Jolene's asking, how would she know if she's bought a genetically calm queen?
Okay, the best way is to ask your queen breeder. Now, if they won't know for sure, but they'll be breeding as best they can for calm genetics, and every hive is different. It's just like dogs or any other animal. The breeder might say this is really nice, calm genetics, but then it turns out to be a little more aggressive than you'd hoped. So you don't always know, but buying queen off a queen breeder will definitely increase your chances, and if they're artificially inseminating, then it will increase your chances again, and you're more likely to get a very calm hive. Or we have introduced queens here a little bit, but more so we're just splitting using natural splits, and we've got a lot of friendly colonies as well. So sometimes that's a bit luck of the draw though. We've got one more question.
Ben's asking, should I clean an excluder that is getting filled with burr comb to make it easier for the worker bees to move into the super?
Okay, I tend to clean an excluder for another reason, and that's just so when you put the hive back together, it's a bit easier to put back together without squashing bees. The bees themselves, they will make room, they'll chew wax away if they're having trouble getting up through the excluder. So I'd more clean it just to make it easier to inspect your hive and put back together. Thanks a lot for watching. Next week we'll cover something new, so please tune in again this time next week, and if you've got questions, save them up for me and I'll be happy to answer them to help you get started with your beekeeping and your flow hive.